next session, which will be on domestic policy. We have on stage with us Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Ambassador at Large, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Singapore, and Chairman, Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore, Mr. Vijay Panda, Member of Parliament, Lok Sabha. I would like to first invite Mr. Vijay Panda to share his insights on domestic policy.
After a full morning discussing business and economics and foreign policy, security, we come to domestic policy. And I'm reminded of President Kennedy's comments about domestic policy. He was famous for saying, domestic policy can only defeat us, foreign policy can kill us. I want to start by giving a little comparison with the kind of government that we've had and the transition that has happened. I and some people of similar political persuasion believe that the last 10 years represented something of an aberration in the way India has been governed, in the way politics evolved. And the reason for that is there was an inflection point in 1991 when India was pushed to its back to the wall and had to reset many established conventions and ways of how it ran itself. And over the next 13 years, through several different governments, we had a broad direction of policy, domestic policy, economic policy, and so on and so forth, which some of us believe was interrupted in the last 10 years. And we believe it was interrupted because of a misreading of the political signals, because of the unexpected election results in 2004, and continuing with the 2009 results. I believe many in the ruling dispensation misread the signals as good economics is bad politics. If you embark on economic reforms, it hurts you politically. Some of us don't agree. We think that those election losses were despite good economics, perhaps because of not enough of good economics. And the political aberration, apart from economic policy, was that you had a situation where a highly respected man, a technocrat, one who was central to that resetting of India's trajectory in 1991, was in charge of government, but he had not won the mandate and he was not a politician. And there are some of us who believe that despite all the ills that we politicians are accused of, democracies can only be headed, governments in democracies can only be headed by people who are political animals, people who have won the mandate, who know the lay of the land, who know when the window of opportunity exists. And the new Prime Minister is nothing if he's not a political animal. He's no one's nominee. He has superseded many, many layers of people more senior than him in his party to come to the top in a meritocracy. And he's won a mandate that has not been seen in 3 decades. Don't let anyone tell you that he's only got 31% of the vote. If you compare apples to apples, it's the same system that we've had. 31% by the measures we have been using for 3 or 4 decades is humongous. 25% is huge. It is a significant victory, it's a significant mandate, and you can see the difference in comparing the first 80 days to, I think the best example would be the first 80 days of the second term of the previous government. When the previous government won election in 2009, it shed its communist allies, and many people thought that that technocrat, economist, prime minister would finally be unshackled to do what he knows best, to do on a bigger scale what he did as finance minister in 1991. And some of us believe that he made a cardinal mistake in thinking that he had 5 years to do it. A political animal, having won a mandate, knows better. And you've seen how in the first days and the first weeks of this administration, the signals that have emanated on politics, on domestic policy, on foreign policy, on security, to use an American phrase, they've all been hit out of the park. Now you can talk about a bit of disappointment about the budget, but I completely endorse what Gautam Thapar said, that in the context of the Indian economy, it was the best possible budget. The reality is this: we have seen a flip over the past several years, with India going from a 9% growth rate and a 4.5% inflation to just the reverse. And whatever growth we were having was not creating jobs. And no matter what you do, it's a big ship. Jobs are not going to start getting created next week. It's going to take 6 months, a year, 18 months to start kicking in. And until you get that equation flipped again, where the growth rate is higher than the inflation by a substantial margin, hopefully double, until you start creating jobs again, to disrupt some of the social sector expenditures that have been taken on by the previous government would be suicidal. It would be political suicide. But the signals are there for all to see. Look at retrospective taxation. No finance minister, particularly one who's been a lawyer, who's been involved in that specific legal issue, can ever say that a government unilaterally forever gives up its right to not do retrospective taxation. But go back and listen to that speech again. Every which way, from every which angle, from every subtext under every sentence, it's a clear message to investors. Read my lips, no more retrospective taxation. The sentiments have already seen the stock exchanges go up, FDI start pouring in, but policy changes have to start happening, and they are happening. I will not dwell on the economic aspects or the security or the foreign policy aspects that have been done. I have 5 minutes now. So let me comment a little bit on how policy is changing, and I will give you a political angle of how policy is changing. One of the problems we've had is that we have not transitioned into a modern democratic structure where leaders who have won mandates realize that they have to nevertheless sell their ideas every day. You look at America, you look at Europe, you look at any of the large democracies, even here in Singapore, just because you won a mandate, you cannot assume that you've got a 5-year or a 4-year unquestioned mandate. Every policy you have to sell every day to your allies, to your opponents, to your public, to the media, which means the modern head of government, the modern politician needs to be a good communicator. And the current Prime Minister is a brilliant communicator. I mean, all communication is not verbal. Within the first 48 hours in his visit to the Parliament, when he bent down and sort of did obeisance at the temple of democracy, he sent a signal that was loud and clear, that the image that had been built up of him, trying to demonize him, was wrong, and that he was a Democrat. Many other signals have gone out in foreign policy and domestic policy. Let me tell you a little bit about domestic policy and then I'll wrap up. My party is a regional party. We just won our 4th term in the state of Odisha. As Mr. Modi in Gujarat, there were several other regional leaders in states, in Odisha, in Bihar, in Madhya Pradesh, in Chhattisgarh, some belonging to national parties, some belonging to regional parties, all proved that good economics can be good politics. These states grew much faster than the Indian average, reversing a trend. I'm talking about the last decade or 15 years. And these leaders kept winning elections again and again, and that was not happening at a national level. And it puzzled some of us why this multi-regional success story was not being replicated. And he replicated it in the sense that he has changed the narrative. Nobody believed that a single party could win a majority. I certainly didn't think in my lifetime, and yet it has happened. We fought a bitter political campaign against each other, against the BJP. But one of the first things he did was reach out to us and reiterated a message that he has been sending out as Chief Minister and as the BJP's nominee for the Prime Minister, which is that he believes in federalism. What does that mean? It means that he believes, having been a Chief Minister for a dozen years, he knows the other side of the coin. He believes that there has to be fiscal devolution to the states. He reiterated that to us. He said that in public, he said it in every which way. At the same time, I think he's quite clearly also reclaiming some space for the center in areas which is legitimately the center, such as foreign policy. I'll give you one major example of how this attitude towards federalism is going to play out. Over the past decades, the center has started interfering with minute aspects of the state's budgets, which is not envisaged in our constitution. 2 decades ago, a lot of the central or the tax sharing money, which would be collected from states, would be shared in a block. Over the last 2 decades, 2/3 of that money goes in specific schemes, which the center decides. Housing schemes, education schemes, health schemes. And these schemes are one size fits all. They stipulate to each state government in a standard formula how they'll be utilized. It doesn't work. What is needed in Orissa is quite different from what is needed in Kerala. One of the major indications this government has given is that the fiscal devolution means they will start cutting down on these schemes and they will start transferring funds to the center on the broad formula, on the macro formula, rather than minutely some Mandarin in Delhi deciding what a village in Odisha needs. That should give you an indication of which direction domestic policy is shifting. Because of limitations of time, I won't be able to give you many more examples, but I will be happy to take them on in question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Ambassador Philip to give his comments.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Tommy Jamshed. Being the last speaker, I have a little leeway to stray a little outside. I will do that. Unlike Tommy and Kishore, I have one main point. And that one main point is this, that domestic policy encompasses foreign policy as well as economic policy. So I feel free to comment on anything and everywhere, you know. So I hope our two chairmen will bear with me. A great deal has been said about expectations of Modi, what Modi has done, his initial 70 days, how he has done. And I think this is, I agree with all that has been said. What I would like to look at is the various segments within India that could pose challenges to Mr. Modi. First, much has been said about the diversity of India and the difficulty of ruling a country with such a complex. This is partly true. But what needs to be remembered is that there is also a common thread that flows from Kashmir to Cape Comorin, which is not a Hindu thread, it is more a cultural thread. And this thread also sort of stretches out to the neighborhood. So when you are talking about Bangladesh or you're talking about Pakistan, Sri Lanka, there is a common cultural thread. President Rajapaksa, before he went to his first visit to India, the Indian newspapers interviewed him and they asked him about the string of pearls and why is China building port at Hambantota, why is it building the roads and so on. He said, why does it bother you? Why do you behave like a chicken without a head, you know? Chinese will come, build, and they go home. You are next to us forever. Your culture permeates into our culture. If we want a child to be named, we look at an Indian name. So the cultural influence is so strong, it doesn't really matter whether it's the Chinese, the Russian, whoever is talking. And you must take it as a legitimate concern for a small country to be wary of its large neighbor and to look at other large countries as allies. I thought this was a very good explanation. But having said that, while I agree that the string of pearls is not a major concern, and I agree that without China, India having peace, Asia will not have peace. The world, the Asian century will not materialize. But at the same time, I think the concern that Mr. Modi must have on foreign policy, and particularly in relation with China, is what happens in Arunachal Pradesh. What India calls Arunachal Pradesh, the Chinese call Greater Tibet. Now, technically, the Chinese are right, because Arunachal Pradesh was at one time part of the Greater Tibetan Empire. But the fact is, the Greater Tibetan Empire was never part of China. It was an independent empire. And that empire was culturally closer to India than to China. When they wanted to get the script, they went to Sanskrit and they adopted the Devanagari script. In 1600 something or 1700, Warren Hastings sent his private secretary to Tibet to negotiate trade. The language that this young English boy from Oxford and the Panchen Lama, not the Dalai Lama, Panchen Lama spoke was Sanskrit. So there is a very close cultural link. This is a thorn on China's side. So China will be particular. Tibet is a core issue for China. And if Tawang, which is in Arunachal Pradesh, where there's a great Buddhist temple, if this by some way, if the Dalai Lama decides that his successor is going to come from Tawang, and India supports it, whatever lovely dreams you may have about building cooperation, you have to think again, because it's scary. So Modi's first challenge domestically is related to what will happen in Arunachal Pradesh. So he has to be careful. The second challenge I think Mr. Modi will have, incidentally, I'm a great admirer of Mr. Modi. Professor Tan Kai Yong and myself, in ISAT, we were the first to invite Mr. Modi to Singapore. His first foreign trip, when people were saying there's blood on his hands, we invited him. And everybody scolded me and said, what the hell are you trying to do? But today they say, oh, great foresight. But actually, we were just doing a little bit of fishing in troubled waters. Actually, we were impressed by what he had done in the 2 years that he had been at that time Chief Minister of Gujarat. Now, on the domestically, the minority issues in India, which means Muslim issues, has to be tackled with great finesse. When I see some of the things that are now currently happening in UP, I get a little concerned. I think this needs to be addressed. Polarization and consolidation is not the way to go. Consolidation and integration is the way to go. And I think wisdom will prevail, but it has to be done. The third thing is the language issue. While I said there is a threat of unity, that goes from Cape Comorin to Kashmir, I must also say that diversity of languages is an important one and has to be taken into account. I was told at one time that Mr. Mulayam Singh, when he was Defence Minister, said he will not look at any memo which is not written in Hindi. There is a fear that similar thing may happen, which is totally unnecessary, because the influence of Hindi is spreading so rapidly and so deeply. I was in Chennai just a few months ago. I took a taxi and the taxi fellow spoke to me in Hindi. So I was surprised. I asked him, why are you talking to me? He said, I thought you were from Bombay. I said, no, I'm from a place called Singapore. He said, oh, do they speak Hindi there? I said, no, they speak Tamil. That's one of the official languages. So he said, can you speak? I said, I can manage. And we spoke in Tamil. But the thing is, I asked him, why did he speak in Hindi? He said, now all the tourists are from the north, so we learn Hindi. The workers we get are from Bihar and Orissa. We speak Hindi. And Bollywood has got a tremendous influence. We watch Hindi movies, so we speak Hindi. So in that sort of situation, the gradual popularity, the increase in popularity, gradual increase in popularity of Hindi will eventually encompass the whole subcontinent. So there is no need to press it. But if you press it, there will be a reaction. And this could surface some of the fault lines that exist in India. And there are fault lines. The next concern, very quickly, is the way the country is run. I think Mr. Jumaboy, he's not here, he's gone, talks about the wastage of food. Mr. Satpal Kata and myself, we are promoters and investors in a cold chain. By default, we have become the largest in the country in that particular business. Our partners are Mitsubishi and World Bank. Our total capacity is only, even though we are the largest, only 80,000 tons. India could take 10 times that. One of the reasons why we have been restricted is that we don't go into the farms, because wastage of food is mainly in the farms. We dare not go in, because when you deal with the farmers, it's a politically sensitive area. We make money, they'll say these foreigners have come and exploited us. And we are not sure in a country that boasts of rule of law whether we can be protected. So there is this challenge that if you want foreign direct investment to come in, you must enforce your laws, you must make sure it is fairly administered, and you must make sure there is clarity in the law. If you do that, I think your foreign direct investments will flow in. The other thing is, one of the things I must compliment Mr. Modi. India is famous, if you go and watch the TV, you watch the news, you read the newspaper, the day you land, you start. Every few minutes there's a breaking news. And everybody gets excited. And they make up stories, you know, this has happened and that's happened. 2 days later it's all forgotten. Nobody bothers to find out. There was a case once I saw a young man being tied to a tree. It was on TV, in a court compound. And they were cutting off his neck. The reason was that he was a marriage broker who had got one of the lawyers into, you know, some mess, and so they were taking revenge on him. Now, how can you have it in the court compound? But the thing is, they show it. Next day, there's no follow-up, so you don't know what has happened. Now, Mr. Modi has stopped all this. No ministers shoot from the hips. No politicians, no permanent secretaries, they make this thing. When there is an official statement to be made, the government makes it. This reminds me of our own locally manufactured People's Action Party. In 1959, Tommy may be the only other person apart from me, because we are the same age group, who will know. 1959, PAP first came into power with an overwhelming majority. the Singapore People's Alliance was voted out because they had actually forfeited the mandate of government to rule. They were ruling so badly. In those days, if you go on Wednesday afternoon to the city council to do something, you will find nobody there because they have all gone to the races. Wednesday was the racing day, so they'll all go to the races. Lee Kuan Yew came in and with an iron hand, he changed that. And you had the current situation with BJP coming into a somewhat, maybe not as bad as the Singapore People's Alliance, but things were not looking too good. And he has an opportunity to change, provided he's firm, he's able to carry the people with him. Because the people will rally around you if they know what he's going to do is for the good of the country, not for his own pocket, not for the pocket of his ministers, not for the party, but for the country. Then they will do that. I think Mr. Modi has a great opportunity and we wish him well. I think he should succeed. He has got the motivation. But in India, it is not wise to take anything for granted. You cannot say, because he's strong, because he has got overwhelming majority, it automatically follows. No. There are a lot of pressures in between that one has to take into account. And I think unless you address them, I think it's going to be very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gopi, for that very insightful comments that you made, specifically on domestic policy and how it relates to everything else. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take 3 questions at a time, and please do state your name and if your question is addressed to somebody in particular. Please go ahead.
The question is about the recent creation of new states in India. We see Chhattisgarh, Uttarakhand, and most recently Telangana. And my question is this a good trend that we're seeing going forward in India? Is this a good thing for the cohesiveness and for the future of India? Or are we going to see this fueling regionalism and, perhaps making the country less secular and diverse than it is today?
Yeah, please, in the back. Yeah, and then you.
Quick questions for Mr. Pandya. One, as a member of a successful regional party, do you see the demise, at least temporarily, of the coalition system in India as a good or a bad thing? And two, since the BJP doesn't have the numbers in the upper house, the Rajya Sabha, to pass legislation, will we see your party, the BJP, backing legislation of the government in Parliament?
Sujin from National University of Singapore. I have a question about Mr. President Panta's notion of fiscal revolution of states. Regarding a way to tackle fiscal or financial deficit for economically backward states, like Orissa, your state, you gave us an example of strengthening central assistance towards such backward states, right? And in fact, if you look at the historical data on share of Orissa in central assistance, the amount was not very substantial, right, compared to other states. So for me, just strengthening central assistance to backward states doesn't make much sense in terms of fiscal revolution. So do you have any other dimensions of fiscal revolution you mentioned? Thank you.
Creation of new states. This you can argue on both sides. There have been a lot of media discussions as to whether we should have a sort of a United States of India going to 50 states smaller, more manageable. I think the real issue is, you've seen big states that have been managed well, and you've also seen small states that have not been managed well. I don't think the issue is one of size, the issue is one of political reform. One other aspect I'd like to say is that because of the past 25 years of the growth of regional parties, the two major national parties were the ones worrying most about losing state elections and have invariably supported breakaway movements. But I think you've seen a major reversal today in that the national party has won a single party majority. So there may be a rethinking even among the national parties that, look, we don't need to break up the states in order to remain relevant. We need to just communicate better our vision of India and win those states rather than try to break them up. Second question was about temporary demise of regional parties, good or bad. I think it's like a pendulum swinging one way or the other, and we had got to a stage where many of the regional parties were wielding, I would say, even undue influence in areas of foreign policy and all, where really legitimately it should have been left to the center. So I think it's a correction, but do not misread it as thinking that regional parties will lose their relevance. India is diverse, India is big, regional parties will continue to play a role. The pendulum will keep correcting one way or the other, depending on the national mood. Second aspect of that, in the Rajya Sabha, yes, we've announced that we will play a constructive role, and we have indeed supported the BJP already in two key issues. They wanted an amendment of regulatory bodies' rules to permit one of its former chairmen to take up office. We supported them in that, and we have overtly announced our support for the insurance FDI reform, although that was not taken up for vote because they are not able to muster the votes. The reality is very simple. The government can convene joint sessions of parliament where they do have a majority, and the unstated message is that if they will first try to thrash out a consensus on most of their big issues. And if they do not succeed, if some of the opposition parties are obstructionists in the Rajya Sabha, then I think they are perfectly prepared to call a joint session once a year to clear 10 or 12 major bills. Now, joint sessions have only ever been held 3 times. They are very rare, but there's nothing in the Constitution that says that it has to be rare. So, if you are decisive and if you have got the political will, that is clearly one constitutional way of getting your way. And I think they will keep that as a sort of nuclear option to get their way through. The last question about central assistance, I want to clarify, this is not central assistance I was talking about. I was talking about the legitimate existing revenue share. Instead of just being shared with the states, the center was stipulating that we want you to spend it only this way or that way, and in a one-size-fits-all policy. That is being changed into a more fiscal devolution, where the center says, all right, as per the formula, this is your policy, you have the freedom to decide how you want to spend it. Maybe more for education in certain states, maybe more for health in certain states, etc. In terms of central assistance, though, there are big issues to be discussed. One aspect of devolution is states ought to have greater right over some of their, for example, Orissa has minerals. And we have a completely obsolete royalty policy, which is administratively decided in Delhi behind closed doors, highly subject to lobbying, highly against the interest of the public and against the interest of the states. We would rather it be done as it is done in Australia, as it is done in South Africa, which is market linked and not discretionary. That would give us much more revenue. So these are some of the issues that the center seems to be saying that they will actually be positively inclined.
Gopi, would you like to add in?
Yes, on the states. I generally agree with what Mr. Panda says. It depends on the leadership of the state. But if you look at, you trace the history of this, I think it was somewhere early 50s, I think. There was a state reorganization commission, and states were organized on linguistic basis. Because before that, the British ruled according to certain presidencies, Madras presidency, Bombay presidency, that took up, divided the country into 3 or 4. This had to be broken up to make it more manageable. But I think going forward, when you have large states like UP, with 200 over million people, I think it may be more efficient to run it, to break it up into smaller states. And hopefully the management, the leadership, political leadership will come up to a standard where you can have many, states and be run efficiently. I am not very happy with the idea of large states because I think they are eventually they become difficult to manage. I mean, 200 million for just one state is quite a large situation. My vote would go for the smaller states.
So we take 3 more questions. Yes, please. Here. Anyone else?
Thank you, sir. I would like to question the commitment of the ruling BJP government presently towards a circular India. I did read some news reports recently about a possibility that school textbooks could be changed to imbibe some Hindutva concepts. And presently, even under the Modi government, I don't think there's any Muslim cabinet minister. So, could you please enlighten us on how committed the present government will be towards secularism in India? Thank you.
Nitin Doshi. This is more in a lighter vein in response to the breaking news that Ambassador Gopinath Pillai talked about. This is more a wish and something that perhaps the business leaders can convey to various news channels in India. It is a very strange thing that we do not have what is known as a normal, what I would call a normal news channel. We have enough examples. The Gulf has it, China has it, CNN, BBC. In India, we just simply do not have a standard news format channel. And perhaps, as I said, it's my wish and I hope we soon will have it.
Anyone else? Yes?
Yes, my name is Joseph from Alpha and Omega in Singapore. We talked about the integration and reintegration of India. Well, if you're going back to history, 1947, we are one country, became 2, Pakistan and India. And 25 years later, 1971, we became 3 countries, Bangladesh, Bangladesh, Assam. Now we have some speakers referred here to the United States of India. Is there a possibility that we can put all the 3 countries together, like one as used to be in 1947? We have history, example, East Germany and West Germany. We became one nation. Thank you.
Yes. Maybe I'll start with Mr. Joseph's question, the last one. It is good to dream, but one must take reality into account. I think if you can have a broad framework that brings certain common items to be discussed on a regional basis, it is possible. But to bring about something like an EU among South Asian states, I think it will take a long time. I don't see that as a likely scenario in the foreseeable future. The question that Nitin asked about national, there is a national, Doordarshan is a national thing. And I would like to, while I find the breaking news a little irritating or sometimes amusing, I have a lot of respect for Indian TV. So with the Indian newspapers. There are good newspapers and bad newspapers. But it has never a dearth of information, dearth of opinions. Some commentators in, like, the Business Standard, for instance, and several others, excellent quality of comments. And I miss that sometimes, because, Singapore, we are used to a certain type of journalism. It has got its merits, it serves a purpose, but it is not as entertaining. If I would have half a day in India, in a hotel room in Bombay, I spend it very profitably because I watch different channels, I read, there are 3-4 newspapers, each one saying something different. Maybe some of them take liberties with the facts, so you've got to discount. Once you know India, you know that where to cut off and where to accept, But I find that it is actually a very vibrant scene, and I wouldn't recommend that we do without it, My own feeling is it should be encouraged. I'm never in favor of licensing papers, because Tommy, myself, we used to at one time edit a paper, and that has since we left the university has been banned and still is banned. So our backgrounds are such that we like full leeway for the newspapers and commentators, but not encroaching on the abusive, or I think that's bad, because a lot of blogs sometimes, they become racial, then it is counterproductive. Otherwise, I think it's good.
Can I ask Mr. Panda one question? This out of Topi's comment, is there room in India for an equivalent of a BBC? The broadcast India's voice to the world.
If you permit, I'll take 15 seconds before answering the questions to give you just 3 examples which I had promised during my talk of domestic policy that the government is doing. Number 1, it is changing its opinion on the unique identification scheme. The BJP had opposed it. Today, they have taken a pragmatic decision, and they will use that to cut subsidies dramatically. Not actually cut them, but shift them to cash transfers. So you save a lot of the leakage. One statistic will be interesting for you. In the 1980s, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi said out of every rupee that the government spends, only 15 paisa reaches the citizen, 85 paisa leaks out. Today, that statistic is something like 27 paisa reaches, as per Planning Commission studies. So cash transfer would save a lot. Second example and third example, again, 2 examples of something that the UPA government had announced would not implement, and the BJP is being pragmatic about it. One is judicial reforms. Been in the air for many years, now being proposed. Desperately needed. Third example, the UPA did actually talk about putting an emphasis on urban. We have been denying our urbanness for a long time. 30% of India is already urban. The Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, well-intentioned, not properly implemented. The BJP seems to be very focused. So these are 3 aspects of domestic policy that show some pragmatism. Now quickly to come back to the questions. Commitment to secularism. The BJP's position has been that secularism in India has got distorted, that it ought to mean same treatment for everybody, whereas it has meant a sort of protectiveness of minorities to the extent that the majority feels that there is pandering. Now, whether or not you agree with their claim, the voters clearly have agreed with it. Maybe some voters have agreed with it on the basis that secularism has been used as an umbrella to cover up all kinds of ills. Yes, we are corrupt, yes, we are this, yes, we are that, but we are secular. And I think there is a reaction to this. But let me tell you, if communal harmony is not maintained by the BJP, they will feel the brunt of India's inherently secular nature. Now, they have always maintained that under a BJP government, there are no or very few riots. Gujarat was a major aberration, but that's largely been true actually. So we'll have to see how far these incidents which are being reported in Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra, they are aberrations or they are a trend, it's too early to say. But clearly, they have to put their money where their mouth is and demonstrate that they can maintain communal harmony. There is actually one Muslim cabinet minister, Najma Hepatullah. No normal news channel. It's right, it's true that we went too quickly from one government-controlled channel to 800 odd channels in India. So there's a lot of tabloid TV, but there are clearly more than niche examples of what you would consider normal channels. Let me give you two examples. In Hindi, I would urge you to watch Ravish Kumar on NDTV. As good as any BBC, as good as any PBS way of handling news. In English, I'd urge you to watch Karan Thapar. Very well researched, very topical, doesn't let the topic stray, doesn't let it get into shouting. I believe that these will get more traction over the coming years. And if I may take a quick plug, my wife is in the audience. She runs a regional broadcasting company. Her channel in the Odia language is the leading channel, and she would take it very amiss if I said it was anything other than normal. South Asia Union, last question. I believe it is already happening. It's long overdue. Very few people are aware that even before the new initiatives by the new Prime Minister, over the last 6 or 8 months, some big breakthroughs have happened. India has started selling 500 megawatts of energy to Bangladesh. Unthinkable a year and a half, 2 years ago. Now this is already causing a breakthrough in Pakistan, who have been resisting energy deals. I think it will take time to get the full benefits of some kind of economic union, but we are headed in that direction.
Kishore has been trying to sell his books. I try to sell my institute. The idea of South Asia, I think, is what we in South Asian Institute, we try to propagate. We do this through our diaspora conference. Once in 2 years, we get the diaspora of the entire South Asian subcontinent, or subcontinent, yes. And we get them here. Sometimes Indians and Pakistanis or Indians and Bangladeshis don't talk to each other from their own country, but in a neutral and non-threatening atmosphere like in Singapore, they become much more friendly and they've traced their roots. There's a case in the last one when two people sitting at the table found that before 1947, their families used to do business together in Bombay. But one had gone to Karachi, the other one stayed back, both did very well. So we try to bring the spirit of South Asia through the Institute. In fact, there are many Indian institutes in all over the world, study of Indian studies, but there are very few South Asian institutes. We are one of them. So the gentleman who asked the question whether we could have a South Asia, Mr. Joseph, we are trying to get that done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Pillai, and thank you, Jay, for your remarks this morning, this afternoon. I think that you'll all agree with me that India is a complex country, and I think that discussions like the one we had today certainly help to demystify a lot of the issues that we have to grapple with. I think there's no doubt that we believe strongly that a strong economically strong India can make a lot of difference in moving towards many of the other issues that we have to deal with, especially in our neighborhood, whether they are political or economic. But I think that this government clearly has the intention of doing that. And that, I think, is something that is widely welcomed, as we have seen from all the comments this morning. I would only say that I really do appreciate, Tommy, that we have this opportunity in partnership with ISAS in the US and Ananta Aspen Center and CII to have this dialogue, because I think that it's dialogues like these that help in building better understanding, better trust, and provide a way forward. So I would like to thank, especially on my behalf and behalf of all our delegates from India a very warm appreciation of this opportunity, and to thank the audience for their participation and questions. And this is something we look forward to doing from year to year. So thank you very much, Ravi, and appreciate it. That brings us to the end of our program. Thank you.